My name. Hello, my name is Tom Davis. This is my first post on my channel. Thank you for coming to check out this channel for me. And today I want to discuss a letter that I got. I am a research associate with Probe Ministries, and so I wanted to discuss this letter I got that came in, was actually sent to my boss, and he sent it to me. And the title of this letter is "The Best Method to Defeat the Arguments of Evangelical Apologists Regarding the Historicity of the Resurrection of Jesus." And I found out this guy's name is, um, where it is it, Gary Matson Jr., and he has a website. He posted this on his website, and he sent this letter to us. So I wanted to go through this letter and cover some of the highlights and give some responses to it. He starts off by quoting William Lane Craig. And if you're not familiar with William Lane Craig, he is a world renowned Christian philosopher and theologian and has done a lot of work on the resurrection of Jesus and the existence of God. Um, and so he quotes this from William Lane Craig's book, The Sun Rises. He says, "In point of fact, we can know that Jesus rose from the dead wholly apart from the historical evidence. The simplest Christian, who has neither the opportunity or the wherewithal to conduct a historical investigation of Jesus' resurrection, can know with assurance that Jesus is risen because God's Spirit bears unmistakable witness to him and that it is so." So that's William Lane Craig's words. And this atheist, this Gary Madsen, wanted to respond to that. He thinks that this appeal to the Spirit refutes the historical evidence, the historical arguments for the resurrection. And so as we go in, he starts off by looking at Saul, who later became Paul. He says, um, Saul did not believe in the resurrection. Really? Dozens, if not of hundreds of dead saints were raised to life out of the grave on the first Easter Sunday, but Saul still did not doubt. Was he an idiot? So he kind of creates this like either if the resurrection happened, either you're an idiot or you're not, if you believe it, this Christian view of it. And there's no reason to go there. I don't know any Christians, apologists that are experts on the resurrection, or even theologians or Bible scholars that are experts on the resurrection that would say if you don't reach their conclusions, you're an idiot. That's just silly. Um, so he just kind of sets up this false dichotomy from the very beginning. And he even goes on, he tries to set it, pointing to other religions that don't believe the resurrection. He says no public university history textbook on planet Earth lists the resurrection of Jesus as a historical fact. Is everyone calloused and hard-hearted against Christianity's strong evidence? Well, in Christian theology, yes, we are all sinful. I think if we take time to reflect on our lives, we will conclude that we do wrong things. We do wrong things all the time. Some of them might be what we would call small, but we're still wronging other people. And there's not much of a way around that. Um, and so as he proceeds with this, he comes in and he wants to focus on the testimony of the Holy Spirit. He says, all Christians believe that the Spirit of Jesus, the Holy Spirit, dwells or lives inside each true Christian. Well, um, that's not exactly right. First of all, he's conflating Jesus and the Holy Spirit. He even goes on to call this Jesus Spirit, where no one where in the Bible does the Holy Spirit get referenced to as Jesus Spirit. I don't know any theologian in the history of the church that has described it in those words. So right here, he starts off by creating a straw man. Um, and he says that um, Evangelicals believe that they can feel the presence of Jesus inside their bodies. Ah, some believe that, some have experienced that, others, I would say, are indwelt with the Holy Spirit and have not felt a thing. It's not, most of the evangelicals don't see that as a normal practice. We see it as something that happens, but not something that you can necessarily perceive. So he comes in and he has several points. I'm going to focus on these high points that he comes up to. He says, the way you refute this argument, you start off by asking a question. He says to ask the Christian, so he'd be asking me, do you perceive the presence of the resurrected Jesus dwelling within you? Well, first of all, it's the Holy Spirit, not the resurrected Jesus. Um, as I said, the Bible never refers to it in those terms. In fact, let's turn to the Bible and we will find exactly what Jesus says. Jesus says, this is in John 14, verse 15. If you love me, you will keep my commandments, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper. That helper would be the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is referred to the helper sometimes, particularly by John. To be with you forever, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, for he dwells within you and will be in you. So, this Jesus is speaking specifically to his apostles, his disciples that are there with him as he's kind of heading into Jerusalem. Um, he's there with them, and he's talking to his apostles. He's talking to the 12, really, and I think by extension that we can say that this does to some degree um, apply to all Christians. All Christians, when you become saved, you become indwelt by the Holy Spirit. But nowhere in the Bible does it say it's something that you will necessarily feel. The Bible doesn't give much as far as like a normative experience as to what it's going on. Some people speak in tongues. Some people don't. Um, some people can, have some experience that is kind of emotional. Not all of it emotional, and other people, even though they're indwelt with the Holy Spirit, other than having a confidence that they're saved, can't really perceive it at all. So I think there's a problem with this first approach that it kind of creates a straw man. So what do I perceive? I perceive the presence of the Holy Spirit in me. At times I feel I can feel that. He says, if your answer is yes, please describe how Jesus testifies to your spirit. Um, we've already covered that it's not Jesus, so he's going to say that again, but I'm not going to cover that anymore. Um, he kind of puts it down at the bottom. You, as an evangelical Christian, publicly deny perceiving the indwelling of the presence of Jesus Christ within you. Um, I don't deny that, but so what if someone does? Like, there are times when I can't feel the Holy Spirit and times when I can. Um, so what if I can't? What does that have to do with the evidence? He calls it the Simon Peter test. The problem is the Simon Peter test does not refute an empty tomb, appearances, and the whole narrative, the witness of the women, and the witness of the other all the other people, the disciples, the appearances to the 70. It doesn't refute any of that if I'm not indwelt by the Holy Spirit. So right here, he's kind of going off the rails, but let's continue for a bit. If you perceive the Spirit of Christ dwelling within you, do you believe that this internal testimony of the resurrection of Jesus within you is strong evidence for the resurrection? Um, yeah, if someone perceives that within them, the witness of the Holy Spirit, that is strong evidence. The problem is that the witness of the Holy Spirit is something that is subjective, not in that it's not true, and not in the sense that it's just up to everyone's opinion, but it's something that happens to an individual. It happens like within me. If I have an upset stomach, that's something subjective. It's something about me and what I'm feeling, and that's kind of what we have with this. So, me having the witness to the of the Holy Spirit might be evidence for me, but it's not necessarily evidence for someone else. Just because that's kind of the nature of relationships. Me having seen something isn't necessarily evidence that it happened to someone else if if they don't find me as a credible witness. Um, so this whole thing kind of goes off the rails. He says, um, if you perceive the Spirit of Christ dwelling within you, do you believe that this internal testimony of the resurrected Jesus? So I've read that. Skip on to the next point. It says, now provide evidence that the perception of the inner presence of the resurrection of Jesus creates an insurmountable bias regarding the historical evidence for the resurrection. Um, this doesn't make sense to me. This saying that if I'm going to say I have the witness of the Holy Spirit, he's trying to imply that any argument against it does not matter. Um, I've said if Jesus has not been raised, Christianity is not true. Paul said that. That's been a pretty standard Christian position since the first century. And, you know, this he's skating around actually presenting evidence against it. Bart Ehrman is definitely more honest in his approach because he deals with the evidence, and this guy is trying to find ways not to deal with the evidence. Um, and then he goes in to list certain things, and so he lists the historicity of Jesus of Nazareth, the belief by Jesus' disciples that he appeared to them post mortem in some fashion, the conversion of Saul of Tarsus due to an alleged post mortem appearance of Jesus. He says these are referred to as minimal facts. So he's actually now taking on the minimal facts argument. One of the problems is his approach to trying to refute this by saying that the witness of the Holy Spirit isn't real doesn't refute any of the minimal facts. The other problem is the minimal facts argument isn't the only argument being made. He's ignoring work by scholars like William Lane Craig, who is not a minimal facts argument. He's ignoring other arguments like N.T. Wright, who's making arguments very rooted in history. His big, thick book called uh, this Resurrection of the Son of God is one of the best books on the resurrection, and it's like 700 pages. So he's making these strange arguments and asking about this witness and kind of um, you know then he says skeptics and counter apologists accept these claims because they accept the consistent consensus of expert opinion on all issues. I don't know any, even the minimal facts guys don't accept the consensus opinion on all issues. Gary Habermas doesn't. The point is they're using a kind of a um, rhetorical strategy when they're using this, and it's not that the strategy is fallacious, but they're trying to appeal to a widely accepted set of facts. But the appeal doesn't prove the fact. Each of them could make arguments without making appeal to consensus for the fact. And like I said, William Lane Craig doesn't appeal to consensus. N.T. Wright doesn't appeal to consensus. There's a lot of New Testament scholars. Darrell Bach doesn't appeal to consensus. Craig Blomberg doesn't appeal to consensus. So what's he going to say to them? Um, this ends up um, this ends up being just smoke and mirrors argument. It's kind of a red herring to argue about what the consensus is instead of what the evidence is. Um, and Bart Ehrman appeals to scholarly consensus at times, but Bart Ehrman also admits that scholarly consensus doesn't necessarily prove it. He just says you have to have a really good argument to reject scholarly consensus. So even Bart Ehrman isn't going as far as this guy in the angles that this guy is. He says he wants to present more argument. Um, so his presenting this evidence for bias simply isn't standing up. Not only that, what is his bias? Just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you have a bias. Um, and so atheists have biases on certain things. Christians have biases on certain things. Hindus are going to tend to be biased on certain things. We do have to learn how to work through our bias, but simply pointing out that there's a bias doesn't mean that they're wrong, because you can be biased and be correct. So this is a strange argument at this point. Um, so he moves on. He says, Paul only believed after experiencing a heavenly vision of a talking, blinding, bright light. And so he says, are visions of bright lights reliable sources of truth? They might be. Again, with visions and bright lights, when you're looking at historical value, I wouldn't say that they're all equally evidenced or equally witnessed. So again, he's kind of making this weird these kind of weird things. These weird things. He says hysterical, superstitious people claim to see bizarre things all the time. So right now, he's kind of making an ad hominem. If you believe in the resurrection, you're just you can be dismissed as being hysterical or believing hysterical people. Um, so Paul saw this vision. Is there any evidence that he was hysterical? The women at the grave, which is pretty solid that they saw something. Is that evidence that they were hysterical? They were unlikely to be believed because that was the bias of that time, was that women would be unreliable. And it was at that time, it was legal for women to be legal witnesses. But if you had a male witness at that time, that's what you went with, because that was the culture of the day. It was just less likely to believe the witness of a woman. And he says, um, if an educated rabbi and an emperor of Rome and his troops can see bright lights and believe them to be appearances of divine beings or a sign from a divine being, why couldn't groups of illiterate Galilean fishermen and peasants see bright lights and come to the same conclusion? Well, people see weird things all the time. As a Christian, I have no reason to say that no one would ever see the actions of some kind of supernatural being, like an angel or a demon or something, and seeing a bright light there. Um, you know, they might perceive that as a god. Um, so I have no reason to just out of hand reject all these other claims. I don't need to. There's nothing really necessary for that. So he says that if you believe that you can perceive the presence of the resurrected Jesus, again, properly, Holy Spirit, within you, and that the inner testimony of his Spirit is very strong, no one's going to believe you when you claim the perception does not influence your view of the evidence of the resurrection. Okay, that might be true that if I, you know, say that, nobody's going to believe me because I'm saying that. But the other people believing me doesn't make it true or false. It just means they don't believe me. Um, People say true things all the time, and other people don't believe them. We see that in everyday life with everyday things. Um, so again, this is just kind of a odd way to try and argue about the resurrection. It ends up being a false accusation, and it ends up being an ad hominem fallacy. And it does nothing to do with the facts surrounding the area where we have good reasons to believe we Jesus died. Almost everybody believes that. Well, we have good evidence to believe that we knew what tomb he was buried in. We have good evidence to believe uh, that the tomb was found empty by a group of his women followers. We have evidence to believe that um, there were multiple experiences of the resurrected Jesus in multiple settings and groups and singles. And we have, we have reasons to believe that people saw him in these different settings. The witness is early. The earliest witness is found in First Corinthians, and um, Paul's writing that pretty early. And Paul isn't. That's a confession that Paul didn't make up. That's something that someone else earlier made up. And so when you look at all of this, um, his letter does not refute any of that. At most, his letter refutes a witness of the Holy Spirit, but even then, I don't think it does that. And even if it, I don't know any scholar that is arguing from the witness of the Holy Spirit. Any Christian scholar at any seminary anywhere in the world that is arguing on the basis, knowing the resurrection happened on the basis of the witness of the Holy Spirit. So he's refuting an argument that, as far as I know, no one is making. So I think he's failed in the resurrection. And if you've liked this, you enjoy what I'm saying here, I'm going to be putting out more videos in the future. And please give feedback. I will be happy to answer any questions and engage with you in the chat as we go on. And I look forward to making more videos in the future. Thank you.